An Introduction into New York State Social Studies Frameworks for 4th grade. Hello, I'm Jeff Kresge, and I serve as the District Instructional Coach for the Jamestown Public Schools. In an effort to make the New York State frameworks easier to access and understand, I'll create a series of short videos that will come out about once a month on how you can be covering the social studies frameworks in your classroom. A quick glance at the headlines or any social media feed today is all the proof that we need that teaching of the social studies is more relevant than ever in today's world. As a society, it would seem that we're lacking in empathy, understanding, and a willingness to take even a bit of time to research things on our own. This is where the teaching of social studies can be a powerful tool, both in your classroom and in the world today. The teaching of social studies aims to create open-minded learners who thoughtfully tackle questions through facts and research, not raw emotion or ill-informed opinion. The New York State Frameworks has 7 different standards for the teaching of social studies for 4th grade. There's no requirement as to how or when teachers cover these standards. Likewise, these standards don't have to be taught as a standalone. In fact, I'd urge you to integrate them into what you're already doing to make your work even more meaningful. To support you in your work, I'll cover one of the 7 standards in a short video each month during the school year. Again, you don't need to cover that standard in that month or in that order. However, I hope the videos will serve as a guide or reminder that you're on the right track. Here's a quick overview of the 7 standards for 4th grade found in the New York State Social Studies Framework. I'll use the actual language from the framework and then provide a translation of that standard to make it easier to understand, an example question that you might ask your students, and some topics of study that might help teach that standard. Standard number 1. New York State has a diverse geography. Various maps can be used to represent and examine the geography of New York State. A translation of that standard could be, using different types of maps, charts, photographs, and other data, discover the geography of New York State. One thing we could ask our kids to get at this standard is, how are the areas of New York different from one another? Possible topics of study could be physical features such as the Finger Lakes, the Appalachian Mountains, the Atlantic Ocean, and the Great Lakes. And we could also look at the relationship between climate and geography and farming and industry. Standard 2. Native American groups, chiefly the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois, and the Algonquin-speaking groups, inhabited the region that became New York State. These people interacted with the environment and developed unique cultures. A translation. How and why did the Iroquois and Algonquin cultures adapt or modify the New York environment? An example question we might ask students are, why were longhouses the perfect kind of home for the Haudenosaunee people? Possible topics of study could be the culture and beliefs of the Iroquois and the Algonquin folks, and the influence of the Iroquois on the U.S. Constitution and government. Standard 3. European exploration led to the colonization of the region that became New York State. Beginning in the early 1600s, colonial New York was home to people from many different countries. Colonial New York was important during the Revolutionary period. A translation of this standard could be, how was the area that became New York State settled? How did New York contribute to the economics and culture of the 13 colonies up to and including the Revolutionary War? A question we could ask students is, how did New York's Dutch background influence the state? And possible topics to reach this standard could be European explorers to New York, comparing the Dutch, French, and English relations with Native Americans, comparing and contrasting life under the Dutch and then the English colonial rule, battles in the French and Indian War in New York, Loyalists versus Patriots in New York State during the Revolutionary War, African American support for the British in the Revolution, and the Battle of Saratoga. Standard 4. There are different levels of government within the United States and New York State. The purpose of government is to protect the rights of citizens and promote the common good. The government in New York State establishes rights, freedoms, and responsibilities for its citizens. A translation could be, how do the various levels of government in New York work to promote the safety, the rights, and responsibility of citizens? An example question to get at this topic could be, what are the responsibilities of students as citizens, such as obeying laws, traffic safety, and anti-bullying? Possible topics of study, the basic structure of government, the 3 branches, the federal, state, and local government roles in serving citizens, rights and freedoms guaranteed to citizens, and roles and responsibility of citizens. Standard 5. Different groups of people did not have equal rights and freedoms. People worked to bring about change. The struggle for rights and freedoms was one factor in the division of the United States that resulted in the Civil War. Translation: how have different groups been treated in New York history, such as slaves and women, and what did people do to address these differences? Example questions that we might ask are: how did the actions of Frederick Douglass, Lucretia Mott, and Susan B. Anthony, amongst others, lead to change? And possible topics of study: slavery in New York, the abolitionist movement, specifically looking at Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and William Lloyd Garrison, the women's movement with Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony, and the influence of the Seneca Falls Convention, and New York in the Civil War. Standard 6. Westward movement and industrialization. New York State played an important role in the growth of the U.S. During the 1800s, people traveled west looking for opportunities. Economic activities in New York State are varied and have changed over time with improvements in transportation and technology. So a translation: how has technology and transportation in New York contributed to change in the U.S. over time? A question we could ask our students is: how did the creation of things such as the Erie Canal, steam locomotives, electricity, and other developments change the culture of the United States? Possible topics for study could be transportation with roads and turnpikes, the Erie Canal, improved technology linking people such as the telegraph and the steam engine, and the New York economy, farming, mining, lumber, and finance. We could also look at entrepreneurs and inventors of New York: Edison, Astor, Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, Tesla, Westinghouse, Otis, Houghton, Eastman, Bausch and Lomb, Steinway, Carrier, etc. And finally, we could look at the development of the Western New York, Jamestown area. Finally, Standard 7. Many people have immigrated and migrated to New York, contributing to its cultural growth and development. Translation: how has immigration and migration to New York State changed our culture? A question that we could ask our kids is: what challenges did new immigrants face upon settling in New York, and how did they overcome them? Possible topics: push-pull factors of immigration, the experiences at Ellis Island, challenges to new immigrants, child labor, the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, the formation of labor unions, immigrant neighborhoods such as Little Italy, the Irish in South Buffalo, Great Migration, and the Harlem Renaissance. Again, these are the 7 standards for the New York State Social Studies frameworks for 4th grade. It matters not when or how you convey these to your students, but please make every effort to make your lessons fun, challenging, and engaging for students. And please remember that if you should need any help, lesson ideas, or further explanation of any of the social studies standards, please don't hesitate to contact me at jeffrey.a.kresge@jpsny.org or by phone at 716-483-4393 or extension 7033. I thank you for the work that you're doing to create the active citizens of tomorrow.